Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business podcast. I am your host, Catryn Becker. I'm excited to be joined by Linda Chung of Chung Financial Service Group. She is an incredible person who has done so many things in her time, and I'm excited to share all of it with you. Currently, she is working insurance to help people to increase their wealth and to save the money that they have. Linda, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear more in your words, a little bit more in depth about the services that you provide and what people can expect when they work with you.
What the outside world says, it's sell insurance, but that it doesn't really accurately describe what I do, really, because what I think is more accurate is we help protect families and their wealth. And, if you like to help people, I like to, obviously it's from financial ruin, God forbid if they should pass away or something, it helps, so that their family is not in a bind, and also helps protect their wealth so that God forbid something happens to them, their wealth can grow regardless, and I call it really in an efficient way, tax-free way. So really have their money work better and harder for them. So that's what I love to do.
And that's really nice because most people, when they think of insurance, they think of it as a money draw instead of something that can be positive and protective for them.
Right. Most people think of it, insurance is, how much does it cost them versus how much does it make them?
Yeah.
So done correctly with strategies that have been around for hundreds of years. It's just that most people don't know about them.
So before we get into the kind of the interview, how is the best way for someone to reach out if they're curious to learn more and want to work with you?
On my Instagram, pretty available there, Linda Chung Official, and also Chung Financial Group. Those are the easiest ways. And then also my email is linda@chungfinancialservices.com.
Well, perfect. I will have all of that contact in the information in the notes, but I wanted to make sure that people hearing this information and going, hey, I want to reach out. If they pause this, let's give it to them right away, right now. So from looking through your LinkedIn and, you and I met through JT Fox and being at different learning opportunities, I see that you started out in law, and that seems very different from what you are doing now. What kind of was that jump for you?
It was a couple different things. I think I worked for a top 5 global law firm, and I call them dog years there because, I pretty much was like living and breathing, practically sleeping at the office, like, 60, 80, 100-hour weeks. And I knew that for me was not, the partner path was not really something I wanted to pursue because I looked at, and I sure they had nice houses and so forth, but it wasn't like I could see people there and then be like, oh, I want to have their life. It just wasn't a fit for me. They were stressed out, they were still working long hours, probably on average typically looked much older than their biological years. So that was not something I wanted to do. I definitely knew it was more of a jumping board, and so I knew I wanted to move into something else more business focused. And so I worked in-house then. I moved to Sony Music, and they're much better lifestyle, but also still at the end of the day, it was pushing paper. It was really just spending time just at my computer. I could sometimes, don't tell anyone that, but I really sometimes even made up meetings just to have human interaction, because I could sit there and just be at my computer, just work, everything through email and writing contracts and so forth, or maybe picking up the phone, but very little kind of human to human interaction, and so I had a couple of those moments, like, sitting at my desk at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, even midnight. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, no amount of money kind of this is not like living life, really, for me personally. It was just not fulfilling. And I was just like, okay, I got to make a change. And so I kept on making change after change. I call it a right turn, right turn, right turn.
Yeah, I also take the trial and error approach to figuring out what it is that I want to do. What made you want to go into law in the first place?
It's funny because it's not like that was my first choice, really. Like not even probably the fifth choice. When I was younger, I thought this was kind of my dream. I remember, and I'm dating myself, a woman named Connie Chung. She was a newscaster and she was Asian, and I saw her on TV and I was like, oh, I want to be her. I was like, what is it? Like, some kind of a role model, and she got to interview, very, influential people and so forth. And I just was fascinated with that. And so, I wanted to do that. And then I heard, like, I don't know, it was, my mom, I think, it's just the little ideas and thoughts that kind of stick with you. And she's like, oh, she's like 1 in a million, like the chance of you becoming her is like trying to win the lottery. You got to find something more practical, and I was just like, well, maybe then I really, at a young age too, I wanted to, I don't know, for some reason, I didn't, it was weird kind of, I didn't draw just regular pictures. I would draw floor plans.
Ah,
Okay, so I would just draw my dream floor plan. I just loved seeing, the boxes and designing, and sometimes I design also clothes, things like that. So I loved creating things like that, just kind of strangely, so I wanted to be an architect then, more so. And then also same thing, I heard is like I am Pei, he's like a famous architect, and I wanted to be that. Also, I heard, my mom's voice, 1 in a million. Most architects don't make any money, and it's just like long hours and so forth, and just kind of reality, the statistics of it.
yeah.
So long story short, and then I wanted to be in business, and I was just like, okay, I wanted to be in business, never, not really having any, my dad was a doctor, but not a business person necessarily. I don't know why I wanted to be in that, but, same thing. And then my mom was like, you're a woman, you're a minority, you're going to be discriminated against in business. You need to do something that's more practical and better for you, and I was like, okay. And then, so it was kind of like, well, and I also wanted to be a doctor possibly too, and that was like, I want, because my dad was a doctor. And it's funny because my parents actually wanted my brother to be a doctor. He had no interest whatsoever in it. I wanted to be a pediatrician and go to Princeton. That was my like kind of dream. I didn't get into Princeton. And then when even I got into Dartmouth, which is not so bad, but I went there, but I quickly realized that there's all this like lab work and sciences, and I was decent in sciences, but it was a lot more work than I anticipated. And then I also realized that I was feeling faint at the sight of blood. So it was just kind of like, whoa, I was just like, okay, probably not a good fit body wise, viscerally. I literally felt sick to my stomach at the sight of blood. So those kind of things. And then it was like kind of a default of going into law. And really the only part of law that actually appealed to me was being a judge, like that, and just kind of helping people resolve conflicts. Maybe because I'm a middle child, I don't know, but just kind of being that person to kind of, there's, it's like, I think a lot of problems are just miscommunication. People assume a bad intent is not necessarily there. So, and so I went into, I don't know, I guess I went into the law kind of default, but really focused on the business and not as a litigator. And because I didn't like the fighting part, I liked the arbitration or being that
the resolutions.
Yeah.
I had another guest on the show who's of Asian descent, and she and I were talking how she started out in engineering and is doing something completely different now. And her take was that she felt as an Asian, her choices culturally were either to be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer. Do you feel similar pressure?
Yeah, it was pretty much doctor, lawyer were okay. Doctor was preferred, but honestly, it depends, because my dad was like, well, the medical, being a doctor has changed since when he started. And he quite honestly said, by the time you finish med school, you're going to be so old, you can't get married. He didn't want a path for me or my sister to do that. It was okay for my brother to do that, but not for me. So, it's kind of like own, I don't know, discrimination, I guess, sexual discrimination from your own parents, but also there's certain kind of reality type of thing as well. So, it was kind of a combination of really, then it wound up being, okay, no doctor for you, and then no business for you because too risky. And so the default was lawyer. That was acceptable path.
Well, and I think it's interesting, and I think this is, not just in Asian families. I think it's in all families where, parents want to protect their children, right?
Yes.
And if they've experienced some sort of pain in their life or have seen it, witnessed it, that they try to protect us. And I feel like that's really where the phrase like being put in a box, like in a box, you're safe, right? You're not going to fall off, you can be protected from those outside worlds, but not really understanding kind of the negative implications that can come from that. What
Box can also be a prison.
yeah, exactly. It protects, but it also isolates, um and it's a challenging balance. And I feel like I find myself that way with my own kids of like, oh wait, don't do that. And then it's like, wait, they gotta learn, they gotta have their own journey. And so it's definitely tricky. So, have you seen and experienced other times where you felt like you were either put in a box by yourself, like that you did it to yourself, or that others impose that on you?
Yeah, sometimes when I think about when I was a corporate lawyer, I remember very distinctly there was like a long table, of maybe 20 people or so, and I'm sitting there and taking notes, and it was a deal. I don't know. It was like I think it was like a roll up deal actually of a bunch of plumbers essentially, like buying plumbers, like buying HVAC and different businesses all around the country. And so that was one of my deals that I was working on, and the partner hadn't shown up yet. So I was kind of setting up the room. And I think, someone had said, oh, can you get me coffee? They assumed that I was like an assistant or a legal assistant or something. I'm like, well, no, we can have, someone get you coffee and everything. And they kind of looked at me, and then it was just like, and then when I sat there and I started the meeting, and I was and then he was kind of like, you could see the look on his face. He was like mortified, like, this is my meeting. So, he just asked me to get
your own coffee.
Yeah. I was just like, I was polite about it, but, and I think, cause I was young, and I looked young, I really did. I mean, I was like 25 years old, but I looked probably even younger than that, so they thought I was like the intern or so, but it was just me. I was like the only woman other than, at that deal, I was the only woman on that one. So me and like 20 plus, 50, 55-year-old men essentially,
Right.
so. But those are like pivotal moments. So it was just like, okay, well,
I mean, I can definitely relate to that, coming out of engineering. There were so many times we'd be in some sort of meeting and we were like whiteboarding, and they're like, Catryn, you can go up and write. And I'm like, why? And they said, oh, because you have good handwriting. And I said, have you seen my handwriting? It's pretty terrible, actually. They're like, but you're a girl. It's supposed to be good. It's like, let's not, sorry. So, we talked kind of about what you felt like you could do or couldn't do, but you've really broken out of your box. I mean, you've done so many different things. So what do you think were there other pivotal moments that helped you to go there, or was it more smaller changes that led you to where you are now?
I think there were some things that, it's just like you hear these things and you're like, oh, okay, like you believe them, because they don't have the experience to say otherwise, and some of it, like, because I wanted to be in business, but I remember, meeting people and so forth, and they said, okay, even when I was a music lawyer, okay, and it's a good law job. I mean, I worked for Sony Music, very kind of sexy industry, got to, work with, musicians and so forth, and lots of perks, but ultimately still pushing paper. And then I said, well, I really wanted to do, it's like an exercise of if you had all the time and the money in the world, what would you do? I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I really wanted to have a food business. I love food, and it was like growing, in New York City, it's just like all these amazing foods. And I had all these ideas, and I even, a little bit of a side, I even tested it a little bit because I tried out for the Food Network star,
Did you
like,
really?
yes, I submitted videos and I was like a dumpling diva. And, I just happened to have a friend that worked there. She kind of got me some inside scoop in terms of, you made it a couple of rounds, through it, because they were like, oh, I like the dumpling girl. I like the dumpling girl. So, and it was like, I applied for that and also applied for business school at that point, and it was just like some way I didn't have the really courage, to try it on my own, because I was like, I don't know, I don't know anyone that's has a successful food business that, and I was trying to, reach out and mentor and people and watch and so forth, but, no partner to kind of do it and walk me through it, or kind of, and then I kind of chickened out, and I was like, well, okay, I'll go to Columbia Business School instead, and then they'll teach me how to be an entrepreneur.
Mm.
And because they said things like in the application, will help you have the, entrepreneurial mindset, or, learn how to be an entrepreneur. And no surprise, or now I realize it now, business school doesn't teach you how to be an entrepreneur. It teaches you how to get a job at a company that they have, and that's ultimately what I did. I did the safer route myself. I can't blame, or, anyone for saying, I just took that as I didn't want to waste a lot of time and money and failing, as an entrepreneur, because I knew I didn't know, and had no resources to be able to do that confidently. So I took the safer route, and so I kind of always knew what I wanted. I was just I needed to pivot. Also, what someone said, they said, it's really hard to change both industry and skill set. So for me to go from a music lawyer to a food business person in one step would be really hard. So what I did was I kind of did, but I was able to do it because of business school, and that was kind of where I could.
That catalyst.
Pivot. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. I completely understand it, because I was going from environmental engineering to wanting to go into corporate sustainability, which isn't that huge of a step, but it was enough of that. And that's where business school was my pivot point. But something interesting that you said that I really want to discuss more is the concept of business school teaching you to be an entrepreneur. Do you think that anyone can learn to be an entrepreneur, or do you think that you either are or you aren't, and then there's different skill sets that can enhance what you already have?
I do. I kind of take a view in general that if anything, if you show an example of someone doing it, then you can learn it, a skill. Like, and most of the time things are just a skill, and it's that, though, business school doesn't teach you those skills. Most places, when you're learning, I call it, it's really, they try to teach you content, like memorize this and do this and so forth. That's not a skill, really, in my book. That's just like learning, XYZ, or,
Yeah.
information.
Yeah. And
And I
regurgitating.
think, yeah, I'd say the closer probably is like law school teaches you a skill and teaches you how to think critically for the most part, or, ask good questions and dig deeper. That is a skill, that can be learned. I think entrepreneurship, it depends on what you mean, but like learning how to have your own business and have that, in my mind, it's like going out and, forging your own path. There is a skill, but it takes skills like persistence. It takes, require learning how to motivate yourself, because no one can motivate yourself. I'm in the business of me, myself, and I.
Yeah.
And for the most part, lots of places, they try to teach you or educate you on content and not skills. So that's where I think it can be learnable, but not easily in the areas that I've seen. And I did take some personal development courses, which I think did a much better job. Actually, I say it was, it was amazing because it taught me how to be more entrepreneurial, or building those skills, and better business skills, I think, than business school, and to think more critically than law school. So
That's a really, really good take. And I think, going back to the entrepreneur, I think business school, as you said, so many of my friends, my other colleagues, students, didn't go into starting businesses for themselves. They went to working for others. And I think of like, the migrant or the immigrant worker, coming in from Mexico, because I'm in Texas, so we see this a lot, who starts a lawn business, right? That they have that entrepreneurial spirit, or that innate intrinsic motivation and perseverance and all of those things that you mentioned, without having, because I almost think sometimes knowledge can be a burden in some ways, that we feel like, oh, I don't know how to do this, so let me go learn it, instead of I will learn it in the doing.
Right. I think a lot of it is, I think of it as, you have to have your head, your heart, and your hands and your feet all aligned. If you, just know something, like, I think a lot of learning, they say knowledge is power, but I view it as potential power, because really, if you don't take action on it, it doesn't really move anything in the world.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of that taking action, but also have that heart. And that's where I think it's the motivation, the feeling associated with that, if your heart's not in it, I think it's really hard to, just mentally and physically to keep going. Something that, being in a job that, is just not for you, and you just kind of are going through the motions, that can be very, very draining. Have been there, done that, and, finding something that I think I think it's be willing to actually explore things that are outside what you think are available to you, like it was only pretty much law, it was an acceptable path, but it's just like, there was something in my spirit that kept on being like, no, but it's like this and this and this, getting closer and closer. And it doesn't have to be like all in one step. It probably wouldn't have worked if I tried to kind of bite off too much, in one step, be like, oh, I'll be successful. And I think, those kind of, I call it right turn, right turn, right turn, getting closer and getting closer and getting closer. I've benefited from adjusting and adapting, and then I'm like, okay, now I have more confidence, like, and having started my own business, which I don't even call it my own business, it was just like I gave myself a job, essentially. So it wasn't like a business that was running, like, oh, I wasn't like CEO. I was just kind of like doing side gigs and things like that, and I realized, like, oh, if I don't sell, I don't have a business. So that's the skill that I knew that I had to build, and that's totally learnable, and so that's kind of the reason why I got into, I never did any personal development for that. It was a business reason why I was like, okay, I had that realization. I need to learn how to sell. And it wasn't like any of the courses that I took was, here's how to sell. It wasn't that. It was more like understanding my mindset, understanding my emotions, understanding how to motivate myself, things like that, how to become more persistent, all those skills, I think. And it's never just kind of as simple as yes or no, type of thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we can see so many examples in science and in physics of how our world loves to be in balance. The body loves to be in homeostasis. In physics, we say for every action, there's an opposite, an equal reaction. Like, it always wants to be in balance. And yet, for some reason, in our human experience, we'll focus just on one aspect, the mind, the brain, the learning. But, we lose sight of the value of just the doing, or someone just does, or, and then we don't bring in the heart, as you say. So I think that's a really valid point, that as someone's moving through this, and if it's not working, evaluating where in those three areas is it out of balance, where can it be brought back to center. Well, this was fantastic, Linda. I just so incredibly grateful for you being on here and sharing your story. I think there's a lot of value for people, no matter what stage they're in, on how to make pivots. And I think the biggest takeaway for me was you can't do it all in one step.
Mhm.
And what are those little steps? You know, there's a meme that I've seen, or a little cartoon where it's a picture of someone with a ladder and the rungs are so far apart that they can't reach the next rung, but then the accompanying cartoon shows all the little steps and how much easier it is to climb that ladder when you make it into bite-sized pieces.
Can be done. You just gotta, it's just baby steps.
Yeah. And we hear that all the time, but it's always such a good reminder. And I think the way that you stated it really kind of brought that home, at least for me, and I hope for some of the listeners. So please, Linda, share once again more about what you do and how people can get in touch with you and ways to work with you, and anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think you can reach me at Linda Chung Official on Instagram, and Chung Financial Group also Instagram. Linda at chungfinancialservices.com is my email. And really what I do is I help protect families and their wealth, leveraging the power of insurance that is, and tax strategies typically only known by the top, 1%. So making it available to everyday people and helping them be educated about what's out there. So.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for being here. Thank you, listeners, for being with us. Hope you found this valuable as well. If you liked this podcast, please like and subscribe and share it with your audience as well. Have a great day, everyone. Till next time.